This is the Dreamers Podcast, episode 32 with credit expert Arnita Johnson-Hall. Today is August 24th, 2021.
When I started 14 years ago, being an entrepreneur, being a young African-American, I just was not taken seriously in the credit education and finance space. I found myself trying to market my business and, try to tell people about the importance of credit, and it just went to the wayside. And I said, you know what? What if I created a white guy and I made him seem like he was the owner of A&B Credit Consultants and that I was an employee for the company? It changed the game. I literally found a stock photo of him. I planted his face everywhere. For whatever reason, it worked. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until I ended up building a real estate partnership with a guy. One day I was on Facebook and he sent me a message and he said, "Are you Tim?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, do you own A&B Credit Consultants?" And it took me a while to respond. And he said, "Well, I already know. I looked you up. You own this company." And he said, "Listen, I am just amazed and impressed that you have been able to do this." He was like, there are people who need you, and I would like for you to get in front of this. But he ended up sharing with the CEO of a very popular local magazine here that it was actually me behind A&B Credit Consultants, and they ran a full cover 4-page article on it. It was at that point I had no choice to come out in front of my company, and it was literally by far one of the best things I could have ever done.
Hello world, welcome to the Dreamers Podcast. I am Stephanie Anne-Lyse, also known as Anne-Lyse Wealth. I am a financial coach and an author. I self-published my first book, Dream of Legacy, a guide to help dreamers reach financial independence and build generational wealth. In this podcast, I'll have conversations with experts and thought leaders who dare to follow their dreams. You'll hear about their journey and their money stories. I hope it inspires you, dreamers out there, to live life on your own terms.
Come on, dreamers, let's change the world!
This podcast is brought to you by Dream of Legacy. Check out dreamoflegacy.com for resources to assist you on your journey to financial independence. Hello, dreamers. Welcome to the Dreamers Podcast. I'm so glad you're here, whether you're an OG listener or a first-time listener. In today's episode, I am chatting with Arnita Johnson-Hall, the woman behind Luxurious Credit and AMBC Credit Consultants. Arnita's credit journey inspired her to start her first business, which was A&B Credit Consultants. And she's had this business for 14 years and I've now expanded. And Arnita has an outstanding reputation in the credit space. Her website and Instagram page, Luxurious Credit, inspires hundreds of thousands of women across the globe to normalize and live the luxurious life they deserve by becoming money savvy, enhancing their credit, and investing in themselves. We talk about Arnita's journey from being on Section 8 to becoming a 7-figure business owner. She not only talks about credit tips and the most common mistakes that people make when it comes to credit, but she also shares her challenges with her own personal credit. She talks about the process she went through to switch from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset, how she overcame her financial hardships, and so much more. I recently wrote an article about Arnita for Business Insider. Definitely be on the lookout for that one. There's so much more to her story. Here is Arnita Johnson-Hall. Arnita Johnson-Hall, welcome to the Dreamers Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You're the founder of Luxurious Credit. It's a business that helps people restore their credit and reach their financial goals. I'm curious to hear more about how you get to this position.
Well, it started pretty much after I graduated high school as graduation gifts. My mother gave me and my brother 700 credit scores. And the way she was able to do this was by adding us onto her credit cards as authorized users. So we already had very well strengthened, credit profiles once we graduated. She definitely told us the importance of paying our bills on time, but she didn't necessarily tell us that, our paying habits would be reported onto a credit report. Lenders would determine our credit worthiness to get approved for more credit. So, of course, being young, having access to that type of credit, I found myself within a year having 25 credit cards all maxed out that, of course, I couldn't make the minimum payments on anymore because I was working at Party City, making about $7 an hour. And I just could no longer afford to keep up with the minimum payments. That next year, a coworker telling me, oh, don't worry about it. If you couldn't pay your credit cards, just let everything go. And in 7 years, you're going to have good credit again. So I said, okay, well, 7 years, I'll be 25. So I can go 7 years, with having bad credit. Can't be all that bad. The car that I had, I might end up getting a wreck and I need a new vehicle. I went to the dealership, attempted to finance a Ford Focus. And the salesman literally told me that I could not finance cheese on a burger. I ended up having a daughter. I ended up becoming a single mom, being on government assistance. And the straw that broke the camel's back was I went up for a job at an insurance company, and I knew the young lady in HR. We went to school together, and I sent her my resume, and she pretty much told me, Arnita, you have the job. Don't worry about it. It starts at $60K a year with bonuses. So I really feel like this was just going to be the way of becoming self-sufficient, getting out government assistance, building stability for my daughter. I really had my life planned out on how I was going to transition from Section 8 and government assistance to becoming 100% self-sufficient. She told me that I would hear from them by the end of the week. The end of the week came. I did not hear from them. So I reached back out, and that's when I was informed that I did not get the job because I could not pass a credit reference check. I had never heard of that before. And I was embarrassed. I went home, pulled my credit report. I was embarrassed at what I saw. And that was my first time really realizing and saying to myself, if that's what they saw when they was making the determination to qualify me for the job, from what I'm seeing, I don't believe that I would have hired myself either. FICO starts at a 300. That's the lowest that it can go. My credit score was a 303. And what I began to notice was there were indeed accounts on my credit report that I neglected to pay, but there were also accounts on my credit report that I did pay, and it was showing that I did not pay. So it made my credit report look 3 times worse than what it actually was.
It's just a lot to dig into. But first of all, can you maybe talk about some of the basic credit mistakes that people should avoid to maintain good credit? Because it seems that you got a good credit from your mother. And then because you didn't have, I guess, the knowledge on how to maintain it, you made a few mistakes along the way that got you into a very bad position. So can you talk about some of those mistakes?
Oh, absolutely. One of the first mistakes that I made when it came to my credit was not budgeting for what I am actually able to realistically pay back. And what people don't understand when it comes to credit, not all the time are they going to verify a lot of things. They're just solely going to go off of your credit and feel like, okay, because this person has a good credit score, because this person has a positive credit report, then we're not necessarily worried about how much she makes because this person pays their bills. So I didn't know when to stop. Well, the first thing they want to do is add up their living expenses and their lifestyle expenses. So rule of thumb is like the 50-20-30 budgeting rule. And the 30%, 50% is like lifestyle, 30% is saving, and then 20% is like living expenses. So it's important to calculate your debt to income ratio, and that is to ensure that you are staying within your means.
So earlier you mentioned that you actually had errors on your credit.
Absolutely.
Right. And I read an article in Forbes about the fact that 30 plus million people have errors in their credit report.
Yes.
And probably most of us don't even know about it. So how can someone get that checked, and what can they do if they find an error?
So the first thing you want to do is obtain your credit reports, and you can do that free once a year via annualcreditreport.com. And you are entitled to 3 free credit reports with each major credit bureau, that's Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. And the first thing you want to do is pull your credit report and actually read it. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of us don't know how to do. And that is actually reading the credit report. It looks like a bunch of gibberish, it looks confusing. But one of the best things that I recommend doing is, for starters, all of the bills that you have now that is reporting to your credit report, those are the ones that you want to look at first, because that's something that you are familiar with, because you currently have that debt. And you want to make sure that everything pertaining to that account is correct. And then I like to use like highlighters. So my yellow would be things that I am familiar with. Pink would be one that, the account has actually closed, but making sure that that information is correct as far as like the high balance, make sure that there aren't any late payments. And if it were, is it in agreement with the actual month that I was late? And then the green, highlighter I would use would be for accounts that I am not familiar with. And oftentimes that may be collection debt. They may be something that went unpaid, something as little as a library card. I've seen that. If there was a medical debt that your insurance company, failed to pay, or an old cell phone bill, that is something that you want to identify and challenge. If you find any errors on your credit report, you definitely want to dispute them with the credit bureaus immediately. According to the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which is a consumer credit law that was created by the Federal Trade Commission, anything on your credit report that is not accurate, verifiable, or reporting timely must be removed from your credit report, no matter what it is. It must be removed or corrected. You have to remain adamant, and you must not be afraid to file complaints with the government agencies to ensure that such errors are corrected, so that it can reflect your true financial paying responsibility.
Did you say that you could get a negative impact on your credit due to your library card?
Absolutely.
I did not know that.
Oh, yes. Any debt that you do not pay and that particular company subscribes or pays the credit bureaus to report your information, they can very well so do that.
Very interesting. You started with a 700 credit score, and then your credit score dropped to 303. And, our listeners are in different stages. Some have great credit, others have bad credit. And, I'm curious to hear more about your journey. I know now you don't have 303 credit score. So
no.
How did you move from 303 to where you are today?
So I'd like to share first that your credit is a journey, because life is a journey. And I don't want anyone to feel that their credit defines who they are. And we oftentimes can get stuck in that. So I'm going to share 2 stories. The first one is when my credit score was a 303, I used to hear this credit repair commercial on the radio all the time for a credit repair service. And I signed up, and there was one positive account that I had on my credit report, and that was an auto loan that my mother paid off. Some kind of way they was able to remove that from my credit report. So it was not beneficial. It didn't help me at all. It made my credit a lot worse. And I was working at a car dealership at the time, and I saw how people were treated with good credit versus how people were treated with bad credit. I remember the guy in the finance department, me asking him, like, I want to be like them. I want to be treated with, I want to have that red carpet experience. And he said that you need to get your credit together. And I said, well, I currently pay the company. They're not doing anything. He said, well, do it yourself. He was literally go down to the library and study the Fair Credit Reporting Act. That was my first time ever hearing about that. Went down to the library that next day, and I just fell in love with all of the information. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that this was even possible. So I began to work on my credit, and I went from a 303 to a 650 in 6 months. I went and got a secured credit card, and from there, my credit score ended that 8th month at like a 710 or so. So I went and purchased a new vehicle, and then I ended up losing my job. And it put me back into a financial bind of me not being able to pay my bills. And that is what made me say, you know what, I'm not going back to work. I started to have a great passion, correct the inaccuracies on credit reports and helping people, that I said, I'm going to turn this into a job or into a business. And in the midst of that, my credit went down again. But one thing about having the resources and the credit education is you can always rebound from that and rebuild. I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. I chose the holistic route, and of course, insurance doesn't pay for that. And I found myself in extreme debt again. Here I am, have a successful credit education service of, successful credit education finance blog. And here I am going from a 730 credit score down to a 584 because I have now spent all of my money on holistic treatment and putting a huge burden on my credit cards to be able to afford treatment. And I felt really bad about that because I feel like, how could I be in this type of authority? How can I be an expert, but yet here I am at a 584? I had to allow myself grace and understand that I'm going through something. Like, this is a path that I'm going on, and I'm not going to be on it forever. If I die, I won't be on it at all. My health came first. My cancer tumors had disappeared. And I said, you know what? Now I am going to come out of this pity party, and I'm going to focus back on paying down my credit card debt from medical debt that I had that was on my credit report. And I tackled it again. So I say all of that to say that there are going to be times that your credit may take a hit due to life events. But as long as you have the resources, you can come out of it.
Well, first of all, I'm sorry to hear about your cancer diagnosis.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm glad to hear that you're doing better.
Thank you.
Thanks for being so transparent, because often you hear that you're literally one diagnosis away from going bankrupt.
Yes.
So I appreciate you being real about what you went through. Tell us about what you're doing today, the business that you run, and how you're helping people.
So Luxurious Credit is a credit education and financial literacy lifestyle blog catered to help millennial women become money savvy and be able to create a life that they deserve by ensuring that they're staying on top of their finances, continue to stay educated, and putting themselves in position to acquire a life that they desire. And this started back in 2013 because it was something that I was going through, and I've always dreamed of having the luxury of being able to do whatever I want whenever I got ready to on my own terms. And I began to realize that there are so many women like myself in that space. So why not educate them? So we have almost 300,000 followers on Instagram. And that is one of our strongest platforms. And we post just a lot of credit education and financial literacy tips. We have courses and workshops and things to that nature. And then AMB Credit Consultants is my actual credit education service, where we solely focus on educating our clients on the importance of maintaining good credit, and then also assisting them with correcting inaccuracies that are located on their credit report so that they can reach their credit goals.
I read something interesting on your website that early on you didn't show your face as the owner of the company. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I knew so much about credit. When I started 14 years ago, being an entrepreneur, being a young African American, I just was not taken seriously in the credit education and finance space. I found myself trying to market my business and, try to tell people about the importance of credit, and it just went to the wayside. And I said, you know what? What if I created a white guy and I made him seem like he was the owner of A&B Credit Consultants and that I was an employee for the company? It changed the game. I literally found a stock photo of him. I planted his face everywhere. For whatever reason, it worked. It wasn't until I ended up building a real estate partnership with a guy. One day I was on Facebook and he sent me a message and he said, "Are you Tim?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, do you own A&B Credit Consultants?" And it took me a while to respond. And he said, "Well, I already know. I looked you up. You own this company." And he said, "Listen, I am just amazed and impressed that you have been able to do this." He was like, "There are people who need you, and I would like for you to get in front of this." But he ended up sharing with the CEO of a very popular local magazine here that it was actually me behind A&B Credit Consultants, and they ran a full cover 4-page article on it. It was at that point I had no choice to come out in front of my company, and it was literally by far one of the best things I could have ever done. I was honestly shocked at how people wanted to listen to me, started to respect my advice and support me. It turned into people saying, "You look a lot like me." And it just pretty much walked me more into my assignment, something that I was, kind of fearful of, but I had no choice but to walk into that space. And because of that, it has allowed me to help hundreds of thousands of people from 2014 up until now. I really think me having a successful company to begin with and to show that African-American women can run successful businesses and be in front of it, not being afraid to be brand ambassadors or spokespersons for their brands and businesses.
I can definitely relate to not necessarily wanting to put myself out there.
Yes.
But when you do take that step and you realize the impact that it can have on other people,
yes,
it motivates you to keep putting yourself out there.
I agree.
So let's go back a few years. Can you talk about an early money memory that you have and how it impacted your views as an adult?
I had a desire to become a homeowner, and I didn't think that that was possible for me. Although at that time I was helping so many people become homeowners. And I came from a household, mom would tell us if someone is successful, it was the exception to the rule for them. But it doesn't work that way for me and my kids. If there were any type of ideas, things we wanted to do, it wasn't really pushed because motivation just wasn't something that we did. I definitely went throughout life feeling that I wasn't deserving of certain things. Although my mother ended up becoming a homeowner, for whatever reason, I still felt that that wasn't something that I could do. Also, we were low income household. And then my adult life, I lived in poverty. I was on government assistance. I worked low paying dead end jobs. So again, and I remember me and my daughter, we would ride around certain neighborhoods and just be so inspired by the homes there. And I remember driving into one community, me and my daughter, this was back in 2009. It was just beautiful. We saw Black people walking their dogs and talking to each other. And me and my daughter was just like, oh my gosh. Like I still remember how slow we drove by everyone and they waved at us. And we were kind of shocked because the neighborhood that we lived in, if people weren't familiar with you, you could find yourself in trouble. I was like, oh my gosh, I would love to live like this one day. What do these people do to live like? And then I remember going back to my Section 8 apartment and I was just like, wow, one day I am going to live in something like that. But then another part of me was like, going back to hearing my mom saying, but we just don't do that. So I remember my mortgage broker called one day and we referred customers to each other. And he said, why aren't you in a house? And he said, just try, let me run your credit. Ran my credit. I was instantly pre-approved. And he said, go look for a house. And I went and looked for a house. And again, I wasn't really used to anything. So I kind of looked for houses that was a tad step up from where I was already living. I found a house and it was not in a great area, pretty decent. And I remember taking my mom over there, and my mom was like, let's wait until nighttime and drive back over here. And oh my gosh, we drove back a couple of hours later. And I was like, I don't think this is a good idea. And my mom was like, I don't either. And I went back to my mortgage broker. And I said, you know what? I know I already put down a contract, but I don't think that that's going to be a good area for me and my daughter. And he said, oh, thank God. He was like, listen, your blessings reside outside of your comfort zone. You have to allow God to pour into you and show you what he has for you. He said, I'm going to write down this community and I want you to go check it out. It was the same neighborhood that I drove through back in 2009. And I just had tears. I couldn't believe that he's saying that I could live like this. I ended up building our home and I closed December of 2015, and I've been here ever since. And we are now in the process of building another home. Your blessings are outside of your comfort zone, and you have to transition to have a positive money mindset and get out of your own way. I sometimes feel like we can become our own obstacle. Once I changed my mind about how I thought about myself and how I thought about my own credit worthiness, it had just opened the floodgates for me to honestly be able to do whatever I want whenever I get ready to.
What you said just now is so important. So it seems that you changed basically from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset.
Absolutely.
And there are many people in, similar situation as you were back when you were younger who aspire to build wealth. What steps can they take to do what you did and change their mindset?
I had to become more obedient. Have a vision, make it plain. He will start aligning things once you start putting it in place. And I had vision boards, I had goals, I wrote down outlines, and I made plans, and I worked towards them. No matter what was thrown my way, I continued to work harder because there was something in me that told me, there was something burning. There was something in me that said, you can do better. No matter how much I would try to talk myself out of it, because it was so far-fetched from what I ever saw or saw anyone around me live. You have to have discipline and you have to have goals. Not having goals is scary. Because what do you have to live for or look forward to or work towards? This is something that a lot of people don't want to do, but you have to get comfortable with understanding that with elevation comes separation and isolation. Your goals are your goals, your dreams are your dreams, and oftentimes you have to be by yourself in order to work towards that. And sometimes with that, it may cause a separation between you and people that you never would have imagined, because now you're going after something that you possibly were told that you couldn't do or that you shouldn't do. And you don't want those type of things to be projected onto your bottom line of reaching your goal.
How do you continue to elevate now?
I really feel like I am so tapped in with manifestation and affirmation. I am really in a space to where I feel like there is nothing that I cannot have. And I think it's a mindset. Like, I have manifested so many things and I worked towards obtaining them. And sometimes it happens a lot faster than you would imagine. Now, mind you, this is someone who was on Section 8, food stamps, Medicaid. This is someone who all throughout childhood and most of her adult life told her that she didn't deserve certain things and that I had to live at the level of my circumstances. And as my level of circumstances increased, and the goal, the mission, the objective is to help others do the exact same thing, because I feel like I'm no different than anyone else. So to be used as a vessel to be able to help others do the same is a continuance of motivation for me to keep thriving as well.
There's a popular message about, becoming debt-free before investing. As a credit expert, can you talk a little bit about how you can use good credit to help build more wealth?
Absolutely. I believe everything is all about balance. You do not have to be debt-free in order to start investing. You can definitely utilize your credit to do so. And one of the things that a lot of my clients in my A&B credit program, what we have assisted them with is to be able to purchase property. Some of them are able to do so by getting personal loans and then paying cash for their properties, while some have literally been able to get on a budgeting plan to where they're saving $12,000 to even $20,000 a year to purchase homes or properties cash, and being able to take the equity out of that property to buy more properties and have their renters pay the equity loan.
You try to understand what our guests do to build wealth. And, you're a successful entrepreneur. Can you talk to us about how you invest some of your earnings to create more wealth for yourself?
I am always investing back into my business or starting other businesses or purchasing property. So I am someone who has definitely gotten addicted to investing. I have not played around in stocks as much as I would like, but I definitely am really big in purchasing properties and acquiring businesses.
So can you talk to us about your best money move so far?
My best money move thus far was acquiring 2 businesses. One is a vitamin and supplement brand, and the other one is a vegan skincare line. I believe that thus far, those are like one of my best money moves that I've ever made, especially that those businesses were already well branded and really works itself. A lot easier to buy brands versus starting from scratch and building new ones.
All right. So I like to end the interview with a round of rapid fire questions.
Sure.
Tell me about a book that changed your perspective on life.
The Purpose-Driven Life.
One thing about money you wish you could tell your younger self.
Girl, don't buy it. Don't buy it. At that time, I was such an impulsive spender, emotionally driven spender, and to just be more in tune with myself before making purchases.
What's the best investment in yourself you've made so far?
Taking care of my health.
Filling the blanks in 3 words or less. Money to me is
abundance flows easily.
What do you want your legacy to be?
Generational.
So, Arnita, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for being transparent and sharing your expertise with the listeners. Can you tell the dreamers where to find you?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It was indeed an honor. You can find me on my personal brand, social media outlet, Hello Arnita, on all social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook is Arnita Johnson Hall. For my financial literacy brands, Luxurious Credit, all platforms.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was indeed a pleasure.
That was Arnita Johnson Hall. Next week on the podcast, we have assistant principal turned trader Terry Igioma. The following week, we have real estate investor Stephanie Assi. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Dreamers podcast. You can find today's show notes and all of the links mentioned during the episode at dreamoflegacy.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, here's what you can do to support me and help more dreamers discover the podcast. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. I read every single review and I'll select one review to read on the podcast every month. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Share the podcast with your family, friends, and coworkers. And if you really enjoyed today's episode, tag me on Instagram at thedreamers.podcast and let me know what you liked about it. All right, dreamers, that's it for today. I will see you back here next week for another episode of the Dreamers Podcast.
Okay, dreamers, time to build this legacy.
This podcast is for general information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax, legal, financial planning, insurance, accounting, investment, or any other kind of professional advice or services. Please consult with an appropriate tax, financial, or legal professional to receive appropriate advice based on your situation.